Hey guys, this is Rainbows here with a 1v1 commentary. This is Lost Temple, and this is an interesting game. We have day 9 here at 3 o'clock versus as blue PROTOSS at 6 o'clock. Day 9 is yellow Terran, and I don't actually know if he was random or Terran during this game, but we will see in a minute. Right now he's actually complaining about the load screen, and I really agree with him. Just that there's no really countdown at the load screen when you're finished loading. I mean, it just kind of displays an ambiguous message. I'm using his words, and not using my own right here. But it's just like you're done loading, and then you just wait for everybody else to be done loading, and then the game just kind of magically decide to start, and it's like, bam, do a perfect probe split right now, and it's just so hard. We do see that day 9 is going for a supply depot so that he can continue to build SCVs, and it looks like Az is similarly going for a pylon. Neither player is opting to do any sort of a wall, Az because he's playing against day 9, who is Terran, and day 9 because he is a baller and he does not feel that he's going to really have any problems with early zealots. We will see if Az decides to capitalize on that or not in a minute. Az kind of boosting out a couple of probes, just trying to make use of his macro abilities, which is really a smart thing to do, because PROTOSS just start with theirs. I mean, you get chrono boost right off the bat, whereas Terran and Terran and Zerg, I'm sorry, PROTOSS start with theirs. Terran and Zerg, you have to get them. And you do have to get your basic producing structure, a spawning pool or a barracks before you can build those. And they're both 150, which is kind of interesting that it just all lines up magically. We do see a barrack coming up for day 9, 12 barracks, most standard thing in the world, and I'm assuming that was like a 12-ish gateway coming up for Az. Again, very, very standard. Gas coming in for Az, no gas coming in for day 9. Day 9 is just building a second barracks. Looks like he's going to try to pump out a whole bunch of Marines to defeat any sort of early pressure. What's been going on with these games, this is actually the last in a series of games. Basically what happened was Az was defeating a whole bunch of people, and then was like, hey, I am really cool, and I can defeat you in a duel of StarCraft. I can beat your strategy. And Az's strategy essentially was, in all the games leading up to this, just to push with a whole bunch of stuff and a couple of void rays. I might actually be commentating one of those earlier games in a minute, so I do hope this doesn't just completely spoil it for you. Basically, Az was completely undefeated by anybody up until day 9, and we will see if day 9 is able to deal with him. A Marine is out for day 9, and he's going to be able to push off this probe fairly easily, just because probes do very, very poorly against Marines, and it does look like day 9 is just kind of chipping at Az's structures with this with a scouting SCV, and Az is not really doing anything about it. If day 9 just keeps out of this, Az will lose the game. You do lose the game when you are out of structures. And day 9 is doing a much better job of attacking Az's structures than Az is doing of attacking day 9's structures. We can see that a few more Marines are coming up for day 9. He's just producing Marines out of those 2 barracks. He does have gas up finally, and he does have several guys on it. And he's just doing stuff and building Marines. Az, in the meantime, is researching warp gates, adding another gas, and throwing down. We will see some sort of tech choice soon, just because that cybercore is done. And I'm really curious to see what that is, just to see if he keeps going the same void ray thing that he's been going for the past few games, or if he's actually just going to mix it up. And again, we will see that very shortly. A couple of tech labs coming down for Plot the Younger, and that will enable him to produce Marauders and just really stay on top of any ground unit stuff. He can also get upgrades once he has those tech labs. Without those tech labs, you cannot get combat shields or stim or anything. Both of those upgrades are just so important for making your Terran ball of blobby doom, your Marines really do anything. Concussive shells just right off the bat coming out for day 9. And that's going to really allow him to get a whole bunch more value out of the Marauders that he's building out of these tech labbed barracks. And a gateway coming out for Az. It looks like he's delaying that tech choice a little bit. Right now, Plot the Younger definitely has more combat units than Az, and he's going to push out, but Az does have a gateway, and warp gates is actually most of the way done. This gate's going to be up in time, so Az is going to be able to not necessarily hold it very easily, but he's going to be able to reinforce and push off Plot the Younger's push momentarily. We can see that Az does have a couple of very, very well-positioned stalkers that are going to get in a few hits on those Marines. The Marines do not have that much health. That Marine is a little bit over half right now, and that's going to get taken down by focus fire as soon as Az turns around and fights with these stalkers. Another Marauder streaming in for Plot the Younger, which is definitely going to help. And Az is actually pulling off a whole bunch of pros to deal with this. Looks like he's really taking this push very seriously. He does only have 2 stalkers. It does look like I was misspeaking a little bit when I said that he would have reinforcements up. Looks like he's a little bit shy, but these probes are definitely gonna more than make the difference. And day 9's not really able to kill that much. If we tap on over to unit lost, we can see that basically, other than a couple of stalkers and just a very, very small amount of probes, Az is just able to hold this off very, very, very well. And these Marauders for day9 are just now getting in vision range of Stalkers, and they're just getting taken down completely no problem. These Stalkers are quite fast, and they've got very nice range, so this Marauder is going to get taken down. And day9 has essentially lost most of his combat units. If we tap on over to the unit tab, we can see that he's got 2 Marauders and 1 Marine versus Az's 3 Stalkers, so he was able to do practically no damage to that push. A scan going down, and he is going to see this Robo Facility coming up for Az. That was either the best timed Robo Facility in the world, or Az is actually just going to commit to this and build some Immortals, or Prisms, or Colossi, or anything else or even Observers, that tech choice of Robo Facility does enable. Day9 and Az are actually going for expansions literally simultaneously, so that's a little bit interesting in that they both have their builds worked out to the point where they're expanding at the exact same time. Az is losing all of his Zealot and probably a couple of Stalkers to day9's Marine Marauder force. Marauders are incredibly powerful units, but 2 of day9's Marauders are at about a hit from death, and Az is going to be able to take them down. Hopefully Az will go for Immortals, actually. Just to be able to deal with all of these. No, it does look like day9 has scattered that robotics facility and is switching to a more marine-heavy build. He's pumping out at least a few Marines, and he's finally getting Stim. Stim's about halfway done, which is definitely going to help. And Ghost Academy also going down. He is definitely expecting some Immortals to be coming out for Az, and we do see that Az is indeed producing them. He's not doing any sort of a fancy bluff. If we pop on over to the research tab, we can see that both players are relatively even in food, with day9 having a very slight advantage. And that's going to get eaten up as soon as Az unfood caps himself and starts spending his warp gates, and we can see him do that now. day9 is floating a very small amount of gas, but I'm sure he'll be able to spend it as soon as this Ghost Academy is up, as soon as he starts building ghosts, just because they're so gas expensive. We'll see another 150 as gas just disappear right there as that ghost does come up. And again, both players very even, both players expanding at essentially the same time, both players beginning to get their expansions established. A couple of mules coming out for day9. He's probably going to be very slightly ahead of his Terran opponent in income. Hopefully those ghosts will be out soon, just because he really, I think, needs to push now. Az is coming out with another Immortal, but if Az switches to High Templars or Colossus, it's going to be very hard for day9 to deal with, even with ghosts, just because Colossus do so much damage, and so do High Templars. If they're positioned well, they can get off a storm before that EMP lands and just absolutely decimate these Marine Marauder blobs. day9 getting caught a little bit out of position and losing a whole bunch to some very nice force fields from Az. As you can see, he's pulling a little bit ahead in food, and I'm just going to tap on away from that tab just because I tend to obsess over it a little bit too much. day9's probably going to be able to hold this. He's definitely going to have probes, but it's going to be interesting. Az is doing a whole bunch of damage, and a very nice EMP going off for day9. Some very nice force fields going off for Az earlier, but with those sentries completely EMP'd, he's going to be out of force field, and especially with these SCVs. On these Immortals, SCVs do not do 10 damage, so the Immortal's Hardened Shield is going to be worthless against them. And if we pop back on over to the Resources tab, so that I can obsess over it more, we can see that day9 is actually beginning to get a little bit behind after that push, just because of the force fields were so good. And he didn't quite have the perfect army comp. I guess he didn't have EMP yet to engage Az at that time, and Az was just able to cut his forces in half, isolate half, and kill that half, just because they had to run around the force fields. Force fields are amazing. They're like the best thing ever. And we do see a robotics facility and a couple of gateways coming down for Az, and those in conjunction with force fields are just going to cut through all of day9's forces in a matter of minutes. Both players are still very even, though. Az has a little bit more resources, and he's a little bit ahead on food, but not by that much. And a couple of EMPs really could change it. day9, though, I feel needs to push now, just because he's a little bit behind, and he needs to manufacture a situation where he can win. And right now he's just turtling, really. He's just building a couple of bunkers. And I understand that bunkers are free, but if those are combat units, and if he converted those into combat units, and he spent all of his money and he just immediately pushed, I think he could do a fairly decent job of doing a lot of damage to Az. Az, though, is just pulling massively ahead on food. And we do see that the robotics bay is done, and a Colossus is coming out. That Colossus is probably going to be the target of any chrono boosts that come up from here on out. It does not look like Az has very many. He's got one on his natural, but he's not going to spend it quite yet. And he's actually just kind of boosting his Nexus and getting a Probe Tester, I think. I think that's what